Chapter 91. A meeting in the night. Just who are you? Hearing this young girl's calm voice, the black-clothed person shrugged his shoulders helplessly. After a short bit of silence, an aged voice slowly rang out, "I believe you've seen me at the Z clan's home." Lightly shaking her snow-white legs, Zana's glance roamed around. She offhandedly asked in a soft voice, "Why did you go to the GLI clan?" "I was entrusted by someone to settle some trouble." "Entrusted by someone?" Zana hurriedly asked, narrowing her eyes. This is something I cannot disclose." Yolo waved his hands and said, "But I want to know." With a faint smile on her exquisite face, Zana leapt forward. Her body seemed to float in midair. On her finger, a spiraling pale golden flame with a pointed edge was quickly being formed. Hey, little girl, I know that you are very strong now, but that is not enough to stop this old man," Yolo said with a smile. Zana knit her eyebrows, but she did not speak. She raised her finger, causing several more spiraling golden flame blades to continue appearing. Seeing that Zana was refusing to give up, the two men in the black cloak had a headache. Sighing once again, Yolo helplessly said, "I don't wish to fight with you. If I hurt you accidentally, that guy would be heartbroken." All right, I'm afraid of you. Today, there was someone stupid who took advantage of a girl who was held in high regards by another man. This other man happens to know me, so I was requested to perform some task. Oh, do you think it is easy for an old man like me to run all over the place in the middle of the night? Zana's long eyelashes lightly blinked. Her exquisite face gradually became flushed. She flipped her hand and the flame blades slowly disappeared. Gazing at the black-cloaked man, she said with a wide smile, as expected, "Old Sir and ZNJJ have relationship? Hey, what a quick change in the manner you address me," Yolo said with a smile. "I'm afraid that you have already guessed my relationship with Ziyin a long time ago. In the past, it was only a guess that I couldn't be certain of." Zana shook her head with a smile. She bowed to Yolo while still in midair and said, "Although I am unaware of the old Sir's background, I believe that you have something to do with ZNJJ being able to be rid of his weakened self from a year ago." Yolo faintly laughed, neither denying nor confirming her conjunction. With her beautiful eyes staring at the black-cloaked man, Zana smiled sweetly and whispered, "Regardless of what was the original motive old Sir had in approaching ZNJJ, I hope that you do not have any other intentions towards him. Zana will look at anyone who poses a threat to ZNJJ with enmity. Old Sir may be very strong, but believe me, I have the ability to say such things. TSK. What a strong girl." Hearing Zana's slightly threatening words, Yolo was stunned as he commented, "My only wish is that ZNJJ not be deceived and hurt by others." With a slight smile, Zana once again bowed to Yolo and said, "It's already late. I need to return home. I hope that you will not tell ZNJJ what you have witnessed tonight. Rest assured, I will not mention a single word." Yolo nodded his head. Within him, he jokingly added, "Because he has already witnessed everything himself." Hearing Yolo reply, Zana smiled. Just as she turned her body, a green shadow suddenly appeared. After being momentarily stunned, Zana's small hand reached out and drew it into her palms. Zana was startled as she stared at the jade bottle. She shifted her gaze toward the black-cloaked man. "Having used a secret technique, you will likely be weak for the next few days. This bottle contains energy replenishment powder. Keep it and recover quickly. Otherwise, someone will feel hurt seeing your sickly appearance," Yolo said indifferently. Hearing this, Zana's small face turned red. Carrying the jade bottle in her hands, she nodded gratefully at the black-cloaked man before lightly pressing her feet in the air. Her body quickly shot into the darkness and disappeared from sight. Standing on the rooftop and watching the disappearing figure, Yolo suddenly took in a deep breath and muttered, "Back then, when you stealthily entered the girl's room and strangely came up with some useless idea of warming blood vessels, you had accidentally got hold of the girl's heart. Oh, come to think of it, your luck is something that others would be jealous of." Under the black cloak, Ziyin rubbed his nose. He knew very well that had it not been for the incident in their childhood, the grown-up Zana would have treated him with the same attitude that she gave others. Of course, these hypothetical thoughts held no water in front of reality. Hey, he had silently entered the heart of a girl at her most fragile moment and unintentionally left a memory which consisted only of him within her heart. Laughing a little pridefully, Ziyan cupped his hands behind his head and allowed Yao Lo to control his body. His body quickly shot toward the Z clan's home. Once he reached the Z clan's home, Ziyan carefully avoided the courtyard where Zana's room was to not alert her about his presence. He landed in the courtyard near his room and rushed into his room, gently closing the door behind him as he did so. In his room, Ziyan hurriedly removed the black cloak and stored it within the storage ring. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. He weakly lay on his bed and lazily mumbled to himself, "Oh, what a beautiful night." In the early morning of the next day at the Jialai clan's home, Jialai's current expression was gloomy and frightening. Threads of cold aura were emitted from his body, terrifying the kneeling beautiful female servant who was trembling in fear. Sweeping his cold gaze across the room where Liu Shi had resided, Jialai said crisply, "You said that Liu Shi had disappeared." "Yes, clan leader. Yesterday, this lowly servant suddenly fainted without reason and only woke up the next morning. Master Liu Shi was already missing by then." This lowly servant had asked the guards outside, but they have not seen Master Liu Shi either, the female servant cautiously said while trembling in fear. "From the time he returned to his room yesterday night, I have not detected him leaving. Moreover, there are Dosi-level guards posted at the two entrances into the Jialai clan's home. With Liu Shi's ability, he would not be able to leave the place without anyone noticing. This girl doesn't know either." The servant girl's face was ashened. She was afraid that Jialai would put the blame on her. Jialai felt the corner of his eyes twitch. His feelings were in a mess as he took in a deep breath and ignored the quivering female servant. Slowly, he walked to every corner of the room. Seeing Jialai's action, the servant girl dared not speak. Her kneeling body did not even dare move an inch. As he was walking through the quiet room, Jialai suddenly came to a stop at one corner. His eyes stared at the small pile of ashes at the corner of the room. With his heart beating wildly, Jialai bent down. He used his finger to extract some of the powder and sniffed it under his nose. Instantly, the cold expression turned into fear. Jialai let out a deep breath. He suddenly felt that his legs were a little numb. A cold feeling was slowly but uncontrollably coming up from deep within his heart. Liu Shi was actually murdered under my watch. Chapter 92, Rob. By the time Ziyan woke up from his sleep, the sky was already very bright. Warm sunlight entered through the gaps in the window, leaving spots of light on the ground. Getting up, Ziyan's sleepy gaze was hazy as he sat on the bed and stared blankly for a long while before finally getting rid of his desire to continue sleeping. Shaking his waking head, he lazily got out of bed and randomly washed his face. Just as his washing was done, a faint knock vibrated from the door. This was coupled with a young lady's soft and gentle voice. "Ziyan Zhe, have you not woken up?" Hearing this voice, Ziyan's eyebrows twitched. He quickly wiped off the moisture on his face and walked to the door. The door screeched as he slowly pulled it open. After opening the door, a blinding light suddenly shot into the room, causing Ziyan to habitually close his eyes. A while later, he slowly opened his eyes and shifted his gaze to the lady in green who was standing quietly by the doorway. Today, Zana was once again wearing green. Her appropriate clothes matched her lotus-like refinement, prompting the young man in the room to let out some praise in his heart. After randomly scanning Zana's delicate and slim body, his gaze finally landed on the slightly pale, exquisite small face. His eyebrows could not help but form a frown. What happened? With charming big eyes focused on Ziyan's expression and finding nothing but accusation, Zana immediately replied with a smile, "I'm not feeling well." "It's no big deal, not feeling well." Ziyan's eyebrows twitched as he walked out of the room. After closing the door, his palm suddenly grabbed Zana's small hand. A weak and warm do-cha under the control of his spiritual perception slowly circulated in Zana's body. A moment later, Ziyan expressionlessly retrieved his do-cha and sighed in his heart. It seems that the secret technique Zana had used last night was extremely exhausting. In her body right now, only a little weak do-cha was flowing. Clearly, this was the aftermath of using the secret technique. During the early morning, there were many clan members who had woken up to practice. This group was filled with envy upon seeing Ziyan holding Zana's hands while standing by the doorway. Ziyan Zheizhe. A red-faced Zana lightly whispered as she struggled to free her hands. I have no idea what you have done. How can you become so weak? Putting down Zana's small hand, Ziyan stiffened his face and softly said. After those intelligent big eyes scanned Ziyan's face and once again found nothing, Zana secretly heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. Yesterday, I had tried to train a Do technique that surpassed my level and this is the result. I'll be fine after a few days of rest. Ziyan Zheizhe need not worry. Rolling his eyes, Ziyan could only shake his head helplessly as he accompanied Zana to breakfast. After that, he found an excuse and secretly left the clan. Ziyan walked aimlessly in Wuten City and casually inquired about news on the Jialai clan. Liu Ji's disappearance would definitely cause some sensation within the Jialai clan. Contrary to his expectations, however, he could not discover any abnormality in the Jialai clan. The marketplaces had continued to operate and the healing medicine continued to be sold. There was nothing different. Hey, no wonder this Jialai Bai is a clan leader. He could actually suppress this news. Still, he might be able to suppress this for a day, but he can't do it forever. Once the remaining healing medicine is sold out, I want to see what he can do. Ziyan laughed coldly for a while before heading to the Prima auction house at the center of the city. In a remote area outside the auction house, Ziyan put on a black cloak just like he always did and entered the busy auction house. Upon entering the auction house, Ziyan was courteously led into the VIP room by a beautiful female waiter. He waited for a moment before the graceful-looking Yuefei appeared with a smile in front of Ziyan. Ha ha, an important guest. Ziyan DD, what brings you to the auction house? Lifting a teapot, she personally bent her body and poured a cup of tea for Ziyan as she spoke. Whether it was intentional or otherwise, the attractive snow-white skin on Yuefei's chest appeared and disappeared as she bent her body to pour tea. It caused one's eyes to be fixated on it. Ziyan's gaze was almost lost in the magnificent view, but he used his fairly strong willpower and managed to shift his gaze away with a dry cough. His gaze did not leave his cup of tea as he pulled out a dark red storage ring from his breast pocket and extracted 5 small jade bottles from it. In an indifferent voice, he said, Today, I am here to fulfill our agreement. As Yuefei already knew about his identity, Ziyan no longer let Yao Lo speak for him and simply used his young voice. Yuefei's gaze never left the small jade bottles upon their appearance. Happiness appeared on her enchanting face. Yuefei elegantly sat on the chair beside Ziyan. She carefully picked up one of the jade bottles and weighed it with equal care, after which she slightly opened the bottle. A green-colored round pill naughtily rolled out from the bottle. Taking a deep breath of the medicinal smell that assailed her nostrils, Yuefei's beautiful eyes constricted. A while later, Yuefei finally attentively returned the pill to the bottle. She threw an enchanting and beautiful smile at Ziyan who was beside her. It seems that Ziyan DD is prepared to take action against the Jialai clan. Otherwise, why would you come over to prematurely complete our deal? Hearing this, he shrugged his shoulders, neither denying nor acknowledging it. He took out another scroll which contained the names of some medicinal ingredients. These medicinal ingredients had the ability to recover one's strength. Naturally, this was prepared for Zana. Seeing her weak and pale face, Ziyan felt his heart ache. Receiving the scroll from Ziyan, Yuefei, who had a number of such experiences, knew Ziyan's meaning. Without any unnecessary words, she proceeded to call a female waiter and got her to quickly prepare what was on the list. Sitting in the quiet VIP room, Ziyan, who had been silent, suddenly said, It appears that the Jialai clan has gone to other cities in search for a new source for medicinal ingredients. The Jialai clan is now working with a medicinal supplier in Tailan City. However, the price of the medicinal ingredients they purchased from there is 4 times more expensive than it is in Wuten City. Yuefei nodded and agreed with a smile. To think that they are willing. Mockingly shaking his head, Ziyan continued with a smile. Can you provide me with some information on the transportation of these medicines? Hearing this, Yuefei's hand, which was holding a teacup, trembled. Her beautiful eyes stared at the young man beside her with astonishment and said, What do you plan to do, Rob? After a bitter smile, Yuefei once again sighed. The GLI clan was really unlucky to meet a little fiend like you. Shaking her head, your FBI became quiet. She finally stood up and went to the room behind her. After some time, she finally came out with a scroll and handed it to Ziyan. She quietly whispered, "I have received some information from the auction house in Taylan City. 2 days ago, the GLI clan had once again purchased 400,000 gold coins worth of medicinal ingredients. This batch of medicinal ingredients should reach Wutan City by this afternoon. The GLI clan has only paid 100,000 gold coins as deposit for this batch of medicinal ingredients. The remaining 300,000 gold coins is on credit. Protecting the medicinal ingredients are the warriors of the GLI clan, 3 doshis and a dodoshai. There are also another few dozen guards with at least the strength of a doji. 400,000. What a large amount," Ziyan said with a smile as he deposited the scroll into the storage ring. His laughter slowly became colder. "If this batch of medicinal ingredients disappeared, I wonder how they would account to the medicinal supplier. With the current GLI clan being close to bankruptcy, this 300,000 gold credit would be its final blow." Lifting his head, Ziyan watched a female waiter who had just entered. After cupping one hand over the other and thanking your FBI, he went forward and received the medicinal ingredients before walking out of the hall without a backward glance. Sitting on the chair and watching the decisive manner in which Ziyan left, your FBI laughed bitterly and shook her head. She gently sighed. This little boy's actions do not correspond with his age at all. That old man, GLI Bai, is likely going to be in deep trouble. Chapter 93. Midway destruction of medicine. 7 or 8 horse-drawn carriages slowly trotted down the road under the scorching sun of the noontide heat. In its overbearing heat, the guards all around the carts were drenched in a fine mist of sweat, and agitated voices drifted out from the carriages. Part of the escort team was GLI Nu, a 3-star Dodoshai and one of the 2 elders of the GLI clan, was considered one of the strongest within Wutan City. With his strength, having him personally escort the medicinal ingredients highlighted the importance they held to the clan. However, it would seem that GLI Nu had received no news of the disappearance of Liu Shi, otherwise the elder would have immediately returned the expensive ingredients. GLI Nu sat crossed-legged on one of the horse-drawn carriages. Regardless of how much the carriages tossed and shook, his body did not move. Having lived in luxury and comfort for some time, he was growing impatient after 2 days of travel. "It's all because of that damn Z clan. Sooner or later, I will destroy all of you." GLI Nu clenched his teeth and muttered angrily. He then turned his head slightly and observed the neatly stacked medicinal ingredients through a window behind him. A look of helplessness appeared on his expressionless face. Although storage rings would certainly make transportation more convenient, a low-grade ring only had 2 or 3 cubic meters worth of space, and in order to fully store all the medicinal ingredients, it would have required at least 5 low-grade storage rings. These rings were rare and expensive, and even the entire GLI clan had 2. Thus, they could only use the cumbersome method of carriages to transport the ingredients. Tiredly blinking his eyes, GLI Nu, who had begun napping, realized that the carriage at the front had suddenly stopped. Faint angry shouts vibrated through the air. Furrowing his eyebrows, GLI Nu was about to call someone to investigate what happened, when a guard of the GLI clan came hurrying from the front. He urgently reported, "Elder, there is a black-cloaked man blocking our path." Hearing this, GLI Nu's face darkened. Now that they have entered the territory of Wutang City, who would dare block them? With a cold glint appearing in his eyes, GLI Nu nodded his head slightly and hopped off the horse carriage. He swiftly progressed in the direction of the convoy and finally saw a black-cloaked man sitting on a huge rock in the middle of the road. Although he could not see the black-cloaked man's face, he could feel the ill intention from the gaze of the black-cloaked man. "Who are you? Why are you blocking our path?" GLI Nu's gaze swept across the black-cloaked man before asking in a deep voice, "You must be members of the GLI clan." "No." An aged voice escaped from below the black cloak. GLI Nu's face twitched. With a somber expression, he waved his arm. The dozens of guards behind him immediately drew their weapons from their waist and stared inhospitably at the unknown and mysterious black-cloaked man. "Well, it seems that I was right." Looking at the reaction from GLI Nu, the black-cloaked man simply smiled and leapt from the huge rock before strolling over to the convoy. Coldly watching the approaching black-cloaked man, Ji Nu grabbed a huge bow and arrow from the guard beside him. He pulled at the bowstring and the bow bent like a cord. Upon release, the arrow transformed into a ferocious wind and shot towards the black-cloaked man's throat. Accompanying the arrow was a frightening whistle of breaking wind. When it was 1 meter away from the black-cloaked man, however, a group of white flames appeared suddenly, turning the arrow into black ashes as soon as it touched the flame. Watching the scene before him, Ji Nu's face changed color. An uneasiness began rising from within him. It appeared that the black-cloaked man in front of him was not weaker than a dodo shy. Slowly releasing his breath, Ji Nu grabbed a deep blue long spear from a guard behind him. A faint blue doche was emitted from his body. Instantly, the surrounding air became more humid. Clearly, his che method was that of the dark and chilly water element. Grabbing the long spear, Ji Nu stared intently at the black-cloaked man. He adjusted his body slightly before suddenly jumping off the ground. His body turned into a blue light, rushing forward and closing in on the black-cloaked man. In midair, Ji Nu maintained a respectful face as the long spear suddenly and violently shook. The doche on it shone brilliantly. With a vibration of the spear, echoes followed. Overlapping waves a Lojhuan Do technique, was the strongest technique that Ji Nu could fully control. His long period of training had allowed him to master this Do technique to perfection. Being released at its full force, the strength was such that even a 6-star dodo shy would not dare to underestimate it. Following the yell from Ji Nu, a huge blue wave comprised of energy emitted from within the shining blue long rod. The huge wave of energy rose up high into the sky before abruptly gashing towards the rooted black-cloaked man. Around the convoy, proud cheers erupted upon seeing their elder reveal his godlike strength. Throughout their journey, the group had met a couple of robbers, but each and every one of them were all killed under Ji Nu's spear. In most people's eyes, another victim was about to be added. The huge blue wave rolled along the horizon. Within it, a tiny light suddenly expanded. Like lightning, a long spear shot toward the black-cloaked man's head. Seeing that the target was almost within reach, a sinister expression flashed across Ji Nu's face as he coldly smiled. Energy gushed uncontrollably from the spear in his hand. Just as the long rod was about to strike his skull cap, the black-cloaked man slowly raised his head. The image of a delicate and pretty face was revealed under the sunlight was imprinted upon Ji Nu's eyes. This is that rascal from the Z clan. Recognizing the familiar face, Ji Nu's eyes narrowed and his killing intent grew immediately. The long spear grew increasingly closer. Just as it was about to make contact, however, a white flame suddenly flowed from the black-cloaked man's body. Finally, it acted as a fire source and swept towards Ji Nu, who was in midair. The white flame flashed across the horizon and everyone felt a chill on their skin. Immediately, the wave, spear, and person disappeared. On the road, the cheers were suddenly halted. The guards of the Ji clan, like a duck with its neck broken, widened their mouths and hyperventilated. The arrogance on their faces slowly transformed into fear. When their gaze once again fell on the black-cloaked man, the terror within was much like how one would look at a monster. Scanning the guards indifferently, the black-cloaked man slowly extended his hand. A couple of white flames appeared. Jerking his finger, the flame shot forward and lightly fell on the carriages under the gazes of everyone. Boom! With a muffled blast, the horse carriages and the medicinal ingredients simultaneously caught fire and turned into ashes in front of everyone's dull gaze. Chapter 94. Poor Foresight. What? All the medicinal ingredients were destroyed by someone? The furious roar within the large hall nearly caused the roof to collapse. The trembling guard that knelt in front of Ji had a face filled with horror as he swallowed his own saliva. Quaking in fear, he said, "The second elder was also killed by the one who destroyed the medicine." Ji's furious face suddenly froze. His face fell and legs felt weak as he collapsed backwards onto the chair behind him. Ji Nu was one of the 3 dodoshis of the Ji clan. His death added to the turmoil that the Ji clan currently faced. Seeing Ji's reaction, the face of the guard who delivered the message was also filled with distress. At that moment, His mind recalled the frightening strength of the black-cloaked man. It was difficult to imagine that the second elder, a 3-star Dodo Shai, would actually be burnt to ashes by the mysterious man. The frightening scene had given those present the true taste of fear. Who was the one who killed the second elder? After a few minutes of silence, Jialibai finally began to gradually recover. His slightly hoarse voice revealed how big a blow Jiali Nu's death was for him. I have no idea. Back then, the man was wearing a black cloak so no one saw his face. But he could control some kind of white flame, which was also the flame the second elder perished under. The guard shook his head and replied softly, a black cloak, controlling a white flame. After a brief silence, Jialibai's face changed. Manipulating flames to hurt the enemy was the preference of an alchemist, and the only alchemist who had any enmity with the Jialai clan and possessed the strength to easily kill Jialai Nu. All of these criteria caused an image of the black-cloaked alchemist he had accidentally met at the auction house to flash into his mind. Recalling the respectful manner Ufi and Guinai showed towards the black-cloaked alchemist, Jialibai suddenly felt a bitterness in his mouth. They were wrong from the beginning. Back then, just because of a statement from Liu Shi, they had thought the Z clan was simply lucky enough to hire a novice alchemist. However, the current situation told them that the alchemist of the Z clan was much stronger than the incompetent Liu Shi. Jialibai gently shook his head as malicious fury flashed across his eyes. The 400,000 gold coins worth of medicinal ingredients were destroyed, and moreover, they still owed 300,000 gold coins to the medicinal ingredients supplier in Tolan City due to cash flow problems. Jialibai had originally intended to refine this batch of medicinal ingredients into healing medicine and sell the medicine to repay the loan. With the latest development, all of his plans were ruined. The medicinal supplier that worked with the Jialai clan had significant influence and strength in Tolan City. Once they knew that the medicinal supplies were destroyed, they would definitely send someone to collect their debt. However, with the coffers of the Jialai clan having been exhausted, how were they going to find such a large sum of money? If they failed to raise the money, then the Jialai clan's reputation would be completely destroyed by this event. Damn! Unable to think of a solution, Jialibai slammed his palm angrily into the table beside him. Immediately, the black wooden table was smashed into pieces and a wooden fragment hit the face of a guard standing by the side. The latter simply clenched his teeth and withstood it. Taking a light breath, Jialibai forcefully suppressed the fury and malicious resentment towards the Z clan in his heart. He shook his hand and purposefully acted calm as he said, distribute all the remaining healing medicine in the warehouse to all the marketplaces. One more thing. I want everyone to keep quiet about everything that has happened today. If anyone spreads this news, they will be punished in accordance with the clan rules. Yes. The guard's body trembled lightly before he respectfully gave a reply, after which he got up and quickly exited the hall. Staring at the empty large hall, Jialibai tiredly leaned against the chair. This time, even if the Jialai clan managed to survive, their strength would be greatly diminished. From then on, it would be difficult to fight with the Z clan. Thinking of this, Jialibai sighed deeply. For some unknown reason, he was beginning to regret having started the conflict with the Z clan back then. However, this regret came a little too late. After settling a few other matters, Ziyin threw off his disguise and quickly returned to his clan. He requested Yao Lo to refine some strength-recovering pills before quickly delivering them to Zana. Seeing the girl caress the pills and her slightly red limpid eyes, Ziyin received a great boost to his confidence. A few days after Ziyin destroyed the medicinal ingredients of the Jialai clan, Wutan City continued to remain calm on the surface. However, the more observant people began to realize that the members of the Jialai clan who had been causing trouble near the Z clan's marketplace silently disappeared. Their usual arrogance had also diminished. In the face of the Jialai clan's inexplicable actions, some people began to feel a little suspicious. Z clan's meeting room. What is the Jialai clan trying to do these days? Are they trying to give us the impression of being weak? After receiving various amounts of information in the past few days, Zizon narrowed his eyebrows as he spoke to the three elders in the hall. His face was filled with suspicion. Exchanging looks with one another, the three elders shook their heads in unison. After a deep hum, the first elder slowly spoke. This abnormality may not be that simple. Jia Lai Bai is a cunning man. He may well be carrying out some schemes. It is better to be cautious. Zizon nodded his head. Naturally, as a prudent person, he would not relax in the face of the Jia Lai clan's actions. Shifting his gaze, Zizon helplessly shook his head at Ziyan, who was almost napping in his chair. The rascal seemed unable to show any interest in clan matters. Yana, have you met with the esteemed elder recently? Zizon randomly asked as he raised his teacup to his mouth and took a sip. TL, of an intimate form of address. Yan refers to Ziyan. Hearing Zizon's question, the three elders also shifted their gaze to Ziyan. That esteemed elder's importance to the Z clan was understood even without saying. However, it appeared that only Ziyan in the entire Z clan was favored. No other person had the opportunity to meet the esteemed elder alone. Seeing how Ziyan got to enjoy such a privilege, everyone was filled with envy. Lazily raising his eyelids, Ziyan said with a bored voice, I've seen him. After a brief silence, he continued, he intends to take me as his disciple. Upon hearing Ziyan's words, Dijon's hand, which had lifted the teacup, froze. He lifted his face, which was filled with emotion, and stared at the young man who had shrunk into his chair. Swallowing his saliva, he asked in disbelief, did you say that he wants to take you as his disciple? Raising his eyelids and watching Zijon's face fill with happiness and excitement, while the faces of the three elders grimaced with knitted brows, Ziyan nodded lazily. Good, good, good. With a flushed face, Zizon emptied his teacup in one go and excitedly stood up. He paced the room and rubbed his hands eagerly. I knew that my son was not an ordinary person. Damn it, whoever dares to call my son cripple in the future will be killed personally by me. Watching Zijon's agitated manner, Ziyan could only helplessly shake his head and say softly, in half a month, I will leave to train with teacher. I'm afraid it will be over a year before I return. Zizon was stunned. The smile on his face diminished as he raised his eyebrows and hesitatingly asked, are you not planning to take the entrance examination for the Jianon Academy? Jianon is a well-known top academy across the whole Doche continent. If you can enroll there, it would definitely benefit you. I will take entrance examination, but I may skip for 1 or 2 years. Ziyan rubbed his nose and smiled indifferently. Although Jianon Academy is great, they cannot help me surpass Nalan Yanran in less than 2 years. TL, Nalan Yanran, Ziyan ex-fiancé, Nalan Su, Nalan Yanran's father. Ziyan smiled as his gaze swept across the entire hall. Back then, that arrogant woman had crushed his remaining pride at this very place. Hearing the name that was taboo to Ziyan, Zizon's face trembled and he became silent. Standing up, Ziyan lazily stretched his arms and cupped the back of his head as he slowly. The young man's faint laughter floated through in the large hall. Since I made a promise back then, I must keep my word and meet her. It is not that I wish for her to look at me in a better light. It is just that I want to tell her that her foresight is terrible when I finally meet her. Chapter 95. The Circumstances of the Jialai Clan. As the next few days slowly passed by, the amount of healing medicine that the Jialai clan sold in their marketplace at Wutan City began to decrease. On the last day, when the last bottle of healing medicine was finally sold, the Jialai clan members responsible for selling the medicine had little choice but to embarrassingly smile at the mercenaries jostling outside. I'm very sorry. Due to a shortage of stock, our store will be temporarily closed. The mercenaries, who were squeezing for a better spot outside the stall, became silent upon hearing those words. After glaring furiously at the stall workers for a long time, they began to start scolding angrily. As the crowd dispersed, some of the less courteous customers verbally abused the medicine sellers. The news that the Jialai clan had ceased the sales of healing medicine spread throughout the entire Wutan city in less than an hour. The first reaction of everyone was shock, followed by some who gloated at their misfortune, some who felt regretful, and some who sighed. Without the support of the healing medicine, the Jialai clan, in the fight against the Z clan, was totally defeated. Following their miserable defeat, the Jialai clan was severely weakened and their influence within Wutan City was unlikely to ever recover to the high influential level that they had enjoyed in the past. The Z clan's home, meeting room. The Jialai clan has lost the source of their healing medicine. Hearing the news that his subordinate had brought him, Zizon was momentarily stunned before abruptly standing up. The happiness on his face was difficult to hide. In his excitement, he exchanged glances with the three elders, only to find that their faces were also filled with uncontrolled happiness. Zizon agitatedly took 2 steps in the hall. A while later, he finally suppressed his happiness and asked the messenger with a smile, "What about Liu Shi, their alchemist? I have no idea. Ever since the day when Jia Liuo and young Master Ziyan fought, he was never seen again." Hearing this, Zizon and the three elders were surprised. They shifted their gaze stealthily at Ziyan, who was sitting in one corner. "Why are you looking at me? This has nothing to do with me." Seeing the 4 pairs of eyes looking at him, Ziyan rolled his eyes and innocently said. Zizon helplessly shook his head. In any case, he did not believe Ziyan's denial. Nothing to do with him? Then why was it that Liu Shi would vanish after having a conflict with him? That's right. Clan leader, a member of the Jialai clan inner circle, accidentally leaked out that the Jialai clan's second elder, Jialai Nu, was killed by a black-cloaked man when he was transporting medicinal ingredients. After a brief hesitation, the messenger finally said in a low voice. Zizon's strolling legs suddenly froze. He drew his eyelids and nodded before waving his hand to dismiss the messenger. He stared intently at Ziyan and said with a wide smile, "Yana, I don't think that there is anyone in the entire Wuten city who has the ability to kill the 3-star Dodo Shai Jialai. No other than your teacher." Ziyan rubbed his nose and sighed. He helplessly nodded his head. Jialai Nu is indeed dead. Hearing the admission from Ziyan, Zizon also shook his head and sighed. The Jialai clan, which had fought for decades with the Z clan, had actually fell into a decline because of a single young man. This feeling? Zizon bitterly smiled and said, "I know that the reason for the esteemed elder to extend his help is because of you. Still, if there is time, please convey our Z clan's thanks. We owe him so much." Ziyan shrugged his shoulders and carelessly nodded his head. "Now, let us see how the Jialai clan tries to get out of this mess." Zizon laughed quietly. The gloating manner in his laughter was hard to hide. In the competition for the healing medicine market, the Jialai clan had pulled out after a big loss, and this huge loss had severely weakened the Jialai clan, while the Z clan benefited greatly. In these short 2 months, the Z clan had miraculously pulled themselves from their initial miserable position to win the competition. In addition, the 2 months of profit from the healing medicine was equivalent to their annual income from before. Moreover, their influence within Wuten City had obviously surpassed both the Jialai clan and the Olbo clan. Even the Prima auction house had made gestures of goodwill because of Ziyan. With the accumulation of these factors, the Z clan had the greatest spot in the limelight in the entire Wuten City. Nevertheless, a centipede dies but never falls. Although the Jialai clan had received a terrible blow, they were still a force that couldn't be underestimated. The armed forces that the clan had built up over the years was a force no one in Wuten City dared look down on. The Jialai clan was also well aware of the current influence of the Z clan. Hence, after they knew that it was hopeless to continue to compete, they gathered their body like a poisonous snake and began licking their wounds, seemingly waiting for an opportunity to devastate their enemy. However, the days that were occupied in such a manner did not last long. 2 days after the Jialai clan announced the ceasing of the sales of the healing medicine, the Tolan City Medicinal Supplier sent a group led by Dodo Shai. They aggressively entered the Jialai clan family home and rudely demanded that Yelai Bai pay up the 300,000 gold coins owed to them within 2 days. The action by the Tolan City Medicinal Ingredient Supplier was equivalent to worsening the problem for Jialai clan. At this moment, however, Jialai Bai did not dare to recklessly offend a party that was not weaker than the Jialai clan regardless of how angry he was. Therefore, he could only swallow his bitterness and attempt to raise money. After searching all over the Jialai clan, however, they could only find 100,000 gold coins. This was a far cry from the debt they had. Helplessly, Jialai Bai could only thicken his skin and attempt to borrow money from the powers which the Jialai clan had better relationships with. However, there are far more people willing to share in your happiness than aid in your sorrow. Seeing the current pathetic state of the Jialai clan and the hostility from the Z clan, those powers which once had a good relationship with the Jialai clan did not want to get involved in the mess. Helping the GLI clan now would undoubtedly offend a rising Z clan. As a result, even after putting in tremendous effort, GLI was unable to raise a sufficient amount of money. With his face filled with gloominess, GLI returned home and raged like a war god, after which he unwillingly voiced a shocking suggestion: selling the marketplaces. GLI clan had a total of 3 middle-sized marketplaces, and for small-sized marketplaces in Wooten City. The ones that GLI intended to sell were 2 of the middle-sized marketplaces with the best location and popularity. Once these words were out, the members of the GLI clan reacted strongly. Even the entire Wooten City was in a state of shock. The revenue from these to marketplaces basically made up half of the income of the GLI clan. Being forced into selling their marketplaces showed just how desperate they had become. If a marketplace had a sufficient crowd, it was a business venture that would definitely be profitable. However, there were only slightly more than 10 marketplaces in the entire Wooten City. These marketplaces were usually controlled by both the GLI clan and the Z clan. The Orbu clan did not rely on a marketplace for a living. Instead, their income mainly comes from underground gambling dens and brothels. Therefore, after hearing that the GLI clan intended to sell the marketplace with the best location, many people were tempted. However, after the initial fervor subsided, they became downhearted. In the current Wooten City, almost all of the crowds were dominated by the marketplaces of Z clan. Other than the extremely profitable marketplaces of the Z clan, all of the marketplaces could at best only break even. Buying the marketplace at this moment would undoubtedly be a bad business venture. More importantly, whoever bought the marketplaces of the GLI clan would definitely offend the Z clan. Those who were slightly interested had little choice but to withdraw their interest with plenty of disappointment. After announcing his intentions to sell the marketplaces, GLI, who had originally thought that there would be a surge of interest, once again tasted embarrassment. He had not expected that the current influence of the Z clan had already reached such a great stage. With the 2-day deadline drawing closer and the inability to raise the needed money, GLI began perspiring anxiously. Just as GLI became extremely anxious, a stranger appeared. After spending the entire afternoon discussing about the price, the marketplaces were finally bought by the stranger at a cheap price of 200,000 gold coins. In front of the GLI's extremely gloomy face accompanied by killing intent, the stranger swaggered out with 2 sales agreements, feeling extremely satisfied. Upon receiving 200,000 gold coins as payment for the 2 marketplaces, the GLI clan finally managed to be rid of the group from the medicinal ingredient supplier. Seeing those bandit-like debt collectors leaving the courtyard, GLI felt like crying, though no tears came out. Not long after sending off the debt collectors, a member of the clan came rushing over to report the latest news. The 2 marketplaces, which they had sold in the morning, were now under the name of the Z clan. Hearing this news, the extremely furious GLI was stunned for a moment before finally coughing up blood and fainting. Watching GLI being hurriedly carried into the room, all the members of the GLI clan let out a sigh. From then on, the GLI clan was condemned to be a second-rate power in Wooten City.